Okay, okay, I am recording. My idea is that we take your experience, your ideas, and adapt them to the Moroccan context, because we really want you to, you know, to help us train teachers when it comes to mental problems. You see my idea?
Yeah, yeah, we can absolutely talk about it for sure.
Maybe the course that you did, it's suitable for the Moroccan for the American context, but I'm talking about the Moroccan and the Arab context. If you
Covering specific, sure.
if you are interested, maybe after the webinar, after some time, we can talk, we can collaborate on this.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we can definitely talk about it for sure.
Okay, thank you. So happy to see you again. So we will
Yeah.
start the session in 2 minutes.
Okay, I do also have something I don't have a presentation to share, but I have a graphic that I created that goes a little bit deeper into some of the types of educator disengagement that I can show at some point too, as long as I can show my screen.
Yes, I am now trying to I try to activate the sharing. Can you try to see if it's working?
Yeah, let me try. Can you see it?
Yes.
Perfect.
Great. Okay. Let's work. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second online session with our friend and colleague Mandy from America. I know that we did some webinars on this topic, but talking about mental health is of so much importance, because it simply affects our physical health, and it affects our overall being. So in tonight's webinar, we will discuss a few things about this important topic. We will ask some questions, and Mandy will help us understand more about our mental health, and the possibility, to develop interventions for teachers, etc. So welcome, Mandy. Good evening.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me again. And this time I'm not in a car, so
Yes.
I can focus better.
Mandy, if you can talk a little bit about, just a reminder for your background and what you are doing actually for teachers in America, and your project.
Yeah,
Just a quick reminder.
absolutely. Absolutely. So my name is Mandy Froehlich again, and I was an elementary teacher, and then a technology instructional coach, and then a director of innovation and technology. And so my roots are very much in ed tech, but my passion has always been educator mental health. And so I've been talking about mental health specifically with educators since way prior to the pandemic, because it's always been an issue. Is in America, we have had sort of a lot of difficulty even prior to the pandemic getting people into teaching, and mostly because it's a really difficult profession. And now with the pandemic, that the mental health of educators has really suffered quite a bit. And so I talk about that a lot. Probably my most current project is I went back to get my doctorate degree in educational sustainability. And so I'm working on that. My goal for my dissertation is to actually write a program for creating a sustainable program for educators in districts in the area of mental health to best support them. So
Congratulations.
that's my goal right now.
Congratulations for your thesis.
Thank you.
Great. So as you know, COVID-19 has created mental and emotional suffering everywhere, not only in the United States, but everywhere in the world. And there are alarming statistics I would like to share with you, that there are some studies that say that researchers found that 1/4 of teachers say that they were likely to leave the profession when they finish 2020-2021 school year. What you can say about this statistic?
I'm actually surprised it's so low. I would have expected it to be a little bit closer to 50%, although I guess it may be the difference in the study between who's actually leaving and who's just thinking about leaving. When I had done sort of an informal survey prior to the pandemic of teachers on Twitter and asked them if they had ever left the profession or considered leaving the profession, again, pre-pandemic. And 88% of teachers had said that they had either left the profession and come back, or they had left the profession, or they had seriously considered leaving the profession and potentially even tried. So the fact that we've gone through a pandemic and only 1/4 of the teachers are leaving is a testament to how dedicated teachers truly are after going through that kind of adversity, kind of professional adversity, and still staying in the profession. Because 1/4 said that they would like to leave, but 3/4 said they're staying. And I think that, again, that's just a really powerful testament to that. So I am a little surprised that it's not more. But I think it's really unfortunate that we would ever lose teachers at all, because teachers always get into the profession with that moral obligation to make a change in a child's life, which is different than any other profession out there. There aren't many other professions that, there's that moral tie to what the profession actually does. And if anybody feels that draw, those are the people we want in education. And so even for that 1/4 that are wanting to leave, I feel so bad that that's the case, but I do understand why.
Okay, this is also alarming in many ways, because even the teachers who are not leaving the profession, and because those who are leaving for a reason, are leaving because they feel too much pressure, are leaving because they feel too much stress, they are leaving because they can't take it anymore, they can't teach online, they can't teach in the physical classroom. I said that even teachers in the classroom who are not thinking of leaving, they have some mental health problems and issues, and they are affecting the kids, they are affecting the children. So it's like a contagious circle. So we should worry about also both the teachers and the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in both of my books, The Fire Within and Reignite the Flames, I talk about that exact concept actually. And I call it teacher disengagement. And disengagement being, it's not how much you do, it's how much you love what you do. And so how much do you still love teaching? And how I came to that exact conclusion, again, pre-pandemic, was that I had become burnt out in the classroom and I wanted to leave and couldn't find another job because the education degree is so specific that I had a really difficult time finding anything that would work in a schedule for my family and all of those types of things. And so what I found was I was a teacher who was burnt out, who couldn't leave the profession. And my concern became exactly what you just said. What do we do with these people who are super unhappy in what they do when so much of how our jobs could be is filled with joy? Like, we work with children. That should be one of the most joyous professions out there. And so how do we help the people where the joy from their job has been removed? And that really has been the crux of what I have been trying to do for the last 6 years, is try to figure that out. How do we convince people that they have the right to be happy and that they also have the autonomy to make that happen, even if the reason why they weren't happy in the first place wasn't really their fault? And so that's a lot of what my work sort of centers around.
Okay, great. Sounds good. So the idea that I know that the teacher's job or the teaching profession in general is stressful even before the pandemic. I know it's something more than stressful. There is a problem, and I think you guys in the United States we can share the same issue. What is the best way that maybe to encourage people in general and teachers more particularly to talk about mental health issues, to talk openly about mental health issues, to discuss mental health issues without any fear of judgment, without any fear of criticism?
Mm-hmm. So that's a big question, because the issue really lies, a lot of educator disengagement is really connected to climate and culture, and climate and culture of a school, climate and culture of a district. And right now there's so much, there's so many stresses coming that are going to be when we come back from, back into schools. And really, in a lot of ways, we're going to be almost remaking our climate and culture, because we may have been out of the school for a year. We've had really stressful things going on. We've had students coming in and out. We've had teachers coming in and out, administrators. And so a lot of the teacher disengagement is really tied to the culture that we create in the school. Now, it goes a little bit both ways, because climate and culture in a school can impact a teacher's engagement. And so it can be one of the reasons why a teacher disengages. But also, a lot of disengaged teachers in a school can cause a negative climate and culture, which means that it's sort of this symbiotic relationship between the two. And a lot of times when I'm brought into districts, they will say, how do we improve climate and culture? And when my response is, have you looked at how happy your teachers are? They're shocked, because they're like, why would we care how happy our teachers are? And if your initial response is, why should we care how happy our teachers are? That would be the crux of the problem with your climate and culture issue, because we should always care how happy our teachers are, because how happy they are definitely gets brought back into the classroom. And so, it would just make sense that if we have a lot of disengaged teachers, we're going to have that negative climate and culture, because we have a lot of unhappy people and they're not going to want to be engaged in that building. So one of the things that we can do is to start to look at climate and culture and how transparent we actually allow people to be. I've heard of stories where the administrators say the right things. They say, we want you to be honest. We want you to be transparent. We want to talk about how stressful this is. But the second that somebody mentions depression or anxiety or something like that, then all of a sudden they're spoken to and told, don't mention that kind of stuff. Like, we're just talking about very surface level type things. And that doesn't create a psychologically safe environment. You have to have transparency, you have to have trust, and you have to have a safe environment. If you don't have those three things, people are not going to discuss their mental health, because their mental health, we discuss like physical health. If your arm is broken, you can see a cast. Mental health is one of those things that we can't see, and sometimes people like to hide. So it's not only that we can't see it in order to help you, but it's also that they want to keep it hidden. And so we have to create that safe environment that they feel like they can talk about those things. And so one of the first things that people can do in order to help with teacher disengagement is actually start looking at the climate and culture of the buildings and try to find out what is happening in those climate and cultures where people do or do not feel safe to really talk about how they're feeling.
Yes, and this is of course why people are or why this problem of mental health often hide and very hard to detect. Because, as you said, people are reluctant to share their struggles, are reluctant to share their problems. They think they are weak if they do so.
Yep, exactly.
Or they think there is something wrong with them. Some people, what's funny here, that some people compare mental health problems to somebody who is crazy. For example, if you are stressful, if you are talking about psychological problems, you are on the verge of being crazy, or you are already crazy. At least in my context, this is what people say.
Yeah, I've heard that too. And it's, I think that it's one of those things where we've grown up in this society where you have sane people and you have crazy people, and there's no place in between. And, and this is kind of how we were brought up. Like, you are normal or not normal. And unfortunately, as we've gotten older and we've evolved a little bit, we've figured out that that's not actually the case. We have people who suffer from things who are still very kind, compassionate people. We may have somebody who is, they might suffer from depression, but the other part of them that is compassionate for other people who have depression and who bring a more empathetic side to the table is the part that, we need to celebrate, while recognizing the depression as well. Like, it's good to recognize it and to understand what can we do to, to support you in this, but also understanding that some of those mental health issues actually give people an entirely new perspective on different things that are happening around them. And that's of value. And so to dismiss what people bring to the table because they are crazy is really a very surface level, type way to look at the issues that people are dealing with every day. And I do know people who are very sensitive to that particular word because of that. But most of the time, I think people don't really mean any harm. It's just that they're saying things that you know, if they suffered from the same thing, they wouldn't necessarily say.
Yes. So it's the same even at your place.
It is the same at my place. Yes. We have people use that term as well. Yeah.
I was a little bit scared that you are going to say no, it's different, but
No, I think there are some things that are just human, and they are, it doesn't matter where you are, it is going to be the same. So that is definitely one of them.
so I read somewhere before I prepared the session with you that some school coaches are thinking of implementing or let's say inserting some sort of chickens or into their meetings, into their professional meetings, some health mental chickens or short meetings. Uh, it's like as a way to make the workplace function more properly, as a way to make the employees you know vent those stressful times. And what do you think about this?
Yeah, so employee check-ins are a really interesting concept. And I think there are some, it all depends on how they're being implemented. First, that climate and culture piece has to be in place. It has to be, because if you don't trust the people who are doing the check-ins, you're either going to ignore them or lie, one of the two. And so you have to be able to have a trusting relationship with the people who are doing check-ins. The other interesting piece of check-ins is that there is a privacy issue that can come up dependent upon how the people who are doing the check-ins are asking about it. And so, I worked at one point with somebody who did check-ins that the check-in was tied, not intentionally, but it was just at the time that they were asking. It would be the administrator in a meeting with a teacher that was based on how well the teacher was doing. And then they would ask about the check-in. So and with the idea that the teacher needed to be doing something so that they could report back on their mental health. And that is a huge privacy issue. There should never be anything expected to be reported back there. Just checking in to say, hey, how's everybody doing? Is there any way that we can support you better? Those are perfect ways to ask, but without any expectation. And of course, like I said, I'm going to go back and say it one more time. There has to be a level of trust and a really transparent climate and culture in order for that to be something that's going to be well received. I have had teachers say things to me like, great, now my administration asks me what I'm doing for self-care, and I don't feel like I want to come to work and report back on self-care. And if teachers feel that way, the check-in is not doing what it's supposed to be doing, because the second that work starts requiring self-care is going to be something that nobody wants to do. Because you do not want to associate self-care with work. And so it's really important to make sure that it is a check-in, as in, how are you doing? How can I support you? Instead of, tell me what you're doing. I want to make sure that you're doing it, which sounds more of like a compliance measure.
Okay, I understand from what you said that maybe if we do it indirectly, without confronting the person or the employee or the teacher, he or she will feel comfortable. But if we did it like directly, it will be like he will lie, as you say. He will lie. He will say, "I am okay. There is nothing wrong with me."
Right, exactly. Another strategy that I've heard of people doing is during the pandemic specifically, was they would partner two teachers together, and they were sort of their buddies for doing like mental health check-ins. Hey, how are you doing? Is there anything I can support for you? Is there anything I can get for you? Is there anything that I can do just to help you feel better? And I've heard teachers doing everything, from once a week sending each other a funny meme to just shooting off a text saying, hey, how are you doing? And that has been something that I've heard of people having success over and over again, just having that sort of buddy system for to keep everybody as a part of the climate and culture, and also to give everybody a friend. So
this is also funny in a way, because what we are discussing now reminded me of something related a little bit to psychology, because human beings often wear those masks. They are always trying to hide something, their inner intimate self. They don't want this self to be exposed to the others, because they feel like they will be attacked or something. That's why they keep lying. They keep, they keep putting obstacles in front of other people. Do you detect lies often? How do you in your trainings? Do you
I'm actually the
do you know how
worst.
people?
I'm so gullible. I can't. No.
Really?
Oh my gosh. Yes. If you tell me that you are good, I'm like, that is fantastic. We should celebrate how good you are. I am terrible at liars. And I think that I do think that there is something to be said for, people do still need to have private things happening. Like I think everybody has a friend of mine, I shared the link out for this, and a friend of mine on Facebook said, International Woman of No Mystery, kind of joked about me and how I just put it all out there all the time. But that's not true. Like, everybody has private things that they're going through, and sometimes some people process internally, and some people need other people to process with, and some people need to hold some things private until they're ready to let go. And I think all of that is okay, as long as you understand when you need help. And that's the caveat of that whole thing. If you want to process internally first before you share it, that's totally fine. And you can wear that mask temporarily until you do that. But at some point, depending upon the severity of what you're holding on to, you might need help. And at that point, that's when you need to know when to go to somebody else. And there are a lot of people who are not self-aware, who have maybe not worked on their self-awareness enough to necessarily know what that line is. But no, as far as going back to the original question, like, no, I cannot detect liars. You could literally tell me anything and I would totally believe you.
Okay. You talked about being normal and abnormal. Do you think there is a line between what is normal and what is not abnormal in behavior? For example, if I am, what's the best time that I should go to a psychiatrist, or to ask for, or to seek for mental health? Are there any signs, maybe? That appear that I need to go in this process?
Sure. So I'm going to actually kind of backtrack from that question a little bit and say first that I think it's always appropriate to see a counselor. And I think I might have said this on the last show too, like, going and seeing a counselor or psychologist or psychiatrist, going and seeing those people on a regular basis should be seen very much like going to a family practice doctor and getting a physical. And the reason that I say that is because when you're going to your physical every single year, you're going to see your family practice doctor every single year, your physician. When you're going and getting checked out, you're also creating a relationship, and your doctor can see over time how your health has changed. And That way, when you have an emergency or you are sick, you go back into that same doctor and that doctor says, oh my gosh, yes, you've had pneumonia the last 3 years in a row. Let's talk about that. What can we do about that to be more proactive? Going and seeing a counselor, or psychologist, or psychiatrist, it's the same thing. You are establishing a relationship with that person so that when you do have an emergency, they know you. And they might say, well, oh my gosh, Mandy, every year around May, you start feeling this stress and this anxiety. What can we do to be more proactive about that? And so counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists are not only appropriate when you're having an issue, they're very appropriate to see even when you're not. And so I want to say that because I think it's an important part of being proactive on your mental health. As far as if you're struggling, I can really only give you some of the things that I feel and I think that cause me to understand that I may need some additional assistance. I have PTSD. I actually have complex PTSD, which is a little bit different. I have depression. I have anxiety. I have just kind of some of the normal everyday mental health issues that a lot of people tend to have. And I have strategies that I use. And so if I feel my anxiety is ramping up, I might go take a walk. I might try to meditate. I might try to drink more water. I might make sure that my vitamin D is under control because I tend to be low on vitamin D. But if it starts to get to the point where I'm having trouble getting out of bed in the morning, and there's a difference between being tired and not wanting to get up and being exhausted to the point where I just can't face my day. That would be one symptom. Crying more than I am happy would be another thing that makes me go see a counselor. I've gone through these, what I call rage cycles, where I will get really, really mad for what seems to be not an awesome reason, not something that people would typically get really angry over. That's been one reason for me to go in. And so what I think is, if you get to the point where what you would consider to be as like a baseline of your personality, and you are just, either manically happy and then crashing into something more negative, or you're dipping into depression and into anxiety, that would be a really good time to make sure that, if you've exhausted all your strategies, that you make sure that you go in and you see somebody.
Yes. So the idea that with the psychiatrists and people who work in the psychology domain in general is that most of the time they give you pills. So they don't really treat the problem, or maybe they listen for you for a minute and then prescribe some pills, and that's it.
So I think that I think it's unfortunate that that's true. And it's true in the States too, that it's not just there. I have gone to see, I think psychiatrists can prescribe medication, but I think it's that counselors and psychologists cannot. I don't think that there's anything wrong with trying medication if you think it's something that's going to help. In my sort of journey of mental health since I was very young, I have been on several different medications. They all had substantial side effects for me. So I choose to not take them for that reason. My daughter, however, who deals with her own mental health issues, she had been on a medication that absolutely helped her. She was, doing very, very well on the medication. And we were able to wean her off from that medication by her continually seeing a counselor for an extended period of time. And now she's no longer on the medication, but there was nothing wrong with her being on the medication temporarily until we were able to really work through some of her issues, and she was able to heal a little bit more. The medication in that circumstance was a crutch. I also know some people who are on medication all the time. And I think that when it boils down to it with medication is that, you know, you have to be able to do what's right for yourself at any given time. And if medication is the thing, then medication is the thing, and that's all right. You can try it. And nobody should feel guilty, because I think there's a lot of guilt that I understand from people who do go on medication, feeling like they can't do it on their own, that they have to have that medication. And that brings on a lot of you know, disliking oneself and feeling like they can't do it on their own. But I do think that there is a time and a place for medication. I have gone into different counselors who have offered me medication and have declined it, because understanding that it doesn't really work that well for me. And so I think that that's always an option. You can always go in and decline if you think it's not an option. But I also think that if it's something that you feel you need to try, then you need to try it. It's just another strategy, you know, in kind of a long list of strategies that you should have for your mental health.
Yes, you mentioned your daughter, and this will lead us to talk about students who also experience, as I said at the very beginning of the webinar, experience mental health issues. There are some students, you know, who have like suicidal thoughts. Some students suffer from depression, anxiety, etc., and also drug addiction. And this is, you know, impacts their performance, their attendance, and their emotional development. So this mental health issue is actually a problem for everyone, not only for teachers, also for parents, for students, for everyone. So do you think we need to break this silence as teachers and as policy makers, the silence around this topic, and maybe to develop, you know, some sort of interventions, because people are suffering, especially in this period of the pandemic and after the pandemic. Also, people are scared of the vaccine.
Yeah.
Some people think it has some side effects and etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that we can do is start to destigmatize the, you know, the sort of perception of mental health issues to begin with. I can tell you with 100% certainty that anybody who suffers from a mental health issue, whether it be anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar, even down to different kinds of addiction that are typically, you know, the root of it is in some sort of mental health issue. Nobody wants to be that way. Nobody wants to feel that. And so when somebody says they're suffering, believe them. Because, you know, even though we could say, well, people go out and choose to buy drugs, they are doing it with a massive mental health issue prompting them to do that. And so I think the first really important piece of destigmatization is being empathetic and understanding that they're, you know, anybody, whether they're going through some sort of rage cycle, or they can't get out of bed and do their work. Nobody is choosing to do that. That comes from a very dark place. And so we need to make sure that we are being empathetic to the people around us and the behaviors that we see that are related to mental health that can feel very personal and very attacking. And we need to make sure that we're continuing to understand that nobody chooses to be that way. And that, you know, that also comes from our students. And as we come back from the pandemic, we're going to see a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. What if you're, you know, I've used my two daughters, I have 4 kids, The two oldest boys are in college, but my two daughters are very, very different, very different personalities. And one of them was like, pandemic, I'll wear a mask, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll stay home, I'll do work, I'll go to school to do work. I don't really care what's going on. And my other daughter was petrified of the virus. She was so scared of getting sick. She stopped going to school. She didn't want to go back to school. She continued online learning. She quit her job. She did all of the things that really isolated herself from everybody else. And that particular daughter is also the president of every club in school. She's a straight A student. She does very good work. And yet she was so scared of the virus that she sectioned herself off from everything and stopped participating in things because she was scared of getting sick. And that in itself can cause trauma. And so I think it's really important that when we start to think about bringing our students back, what that looks like for them, even if they are acting normal, they are going to need an emotional outlet when they come back, because as they start coming back, all of those feelings are going to start to flood their systems and they're going to need a place to go. Same thing with the teachers. The teachers, I feel, as we come back to the school year next year and things start to feel a little bit more normal, they're going to start to come down from that sort of adrenaline fueled, work that they've been doing over the last 18 months. And they're going to start to feel like they are sort of crashing.
Yes.
Some of the post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms that they have been masking with work are going to start to come to the forefront. And there's going to be a lot of emotional gaps. People are talking all about the learning gaps, and we're going to have to fill those emotional gaps before we can ever have any chance of filling the learning gaps. And so all of those are really important pieces to remember when we start to talk about educator mental health and student mental health. We have a really long way to go before true learning is even going to start to happen. And if we don't address that full on and really destigmatize what's happening and make it okay, we talk about it, it's going to make it all that more difficult.
Yes, it's really interesting when you mentioned that your daughters are complete opposite to each other. One is careless and the other is scared, which is the case in everywhere. Some people are careless, some people are not. They are paying more attention to this virus.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, do you think it's high time that we develop certain resources, materials? I'm talking about mental resources and materials for teachers in the next school year or in the in the upcoming school year, to integrate them in the teaching and learning process. After, for example, a training or something like this.
Yeah. So one of the really interesting pieces about working with mental health is that so much of the growth that has to happen within an individual, right? And so it's really important, and I kind of mentioned this already, that people understand that just because something wasn't their fault doesn't mean it's not their responsibility to heal. Yes. And that's the point that they need to remember, so that they understand that there may have been blame on, say, before the pandemic, people were blaming administrators and blaming the school system and blaming a lot of different things. And now they're saying, well, I'm disengaged because of the pandemic. And that is absolutely probably true. That is, definitely could have happened. But just because the pandemic happened doesn't mean it's not your responsibility to heal. And by responsibility to heal, I mean to yourself, so that you can be happy. And so the whole piece of supporting educators has to come from a lot of different ways besides just mental health, because ultimately educators have to make the decision to really work on their own healing in order to get to where they want to go. So some of the things that we can do for educators is, number one, again, work on that climate and culture. I already said that. Also make sure that they do have, like you said, resources for different things. Do they know how to get help? Do they even know how to contact a counselor if they need somebody? You know, we have health insurance. So how do they go through their health insurance and find who they're even supposed to be talking to? We can provide them with those types of resources, saying, look, you know, if you're feeling these ways, maybe it's time for you to see a counselor, and here's exactly the steps that you need to take in order to see one. Those would be the kind of resources we can provide. We can also do things like look at how many initiatives that we're handing down to educators at any given point in time. You know, is it something that we're causing some of this disengagement because we have so much on their plates that they don't even know what way to turn. And sometimes when I work with districts, they'll say, well, we have all of these initiatives, and yet a lot of the initiatives are not being followed through to fruition. And so what's happening is they're being implemented halfway, but then the part where the teachers really need to be taught how to use the initiative is never fully developed. And so teachers are being expected to do things that they've never actually been taught how to do. And that can add a lot of stress onto a teacher's plate. So we can support educators. We can make mental health days okay to take. You know, if they have a mental or sick days that they're able to use, and understanding that they can take a mental health day, that's a policy we can put in place that's super easy to do to allow them to take that extra time for themselves if they need it. And so the support that we give as you know, a district or as a school isn't always going to be, here's some resources on mental health, even though it should be that too. It needs to be a really systemic approach to what we're doing in order for us to understand what educators are actually going through on a daily basis and how we can make it better. And districts that will do well in this will take that systemic approach. The districts that struggle are going to try to you know, just do one of those things and think that it's good enough, and it's not going to be. That needs to be really looking at the whole educator, just like we've talked about looking at the whole child. So we need to do the same thing for them.
Yes, so it should be done in a systematic way, as you have said.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I have some, you know, I have some, you know, we talked about this at the very beginning before we start the live, that we are thinking with Mandy, of course, because she has a lot of experience in this area, of developing a course, an online course for teachers and for students. We implement some of the ideas we discussed to the Moroccan and the Arab context.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to talk more about that for sure.
Yes. Mandy, I have some quotes and I would like a reaction about them.
Sure.
Some mental health quotes. I have never let my schooling interfere with my education.
Isn't that like, is that Ben? No, not Ben Franklin. Who is that? Do you know who that is?
It's Twain something. I don't. Yes. I don't remember the name, but it's Twain something.
Well, I think that there are a lot of people out there who know how to play school, right? Like I knew how to do it as a child. I knew that if I was compliant and I was a good girl and I did what I was supposed to do, I was going to make it through school. I know this as a doctoral student. that if I do what I'm supposed to do and I do my reading and I write my dissertation, I know that I am going to pass. But then there are the things that we want to know more about, right? And I think that in the realm of mental health, that it's actually an interesting quote, because the education right now, what, you know, some people are knowing how to do school, but what they really need to learn is how to regulate their emotions, how to be a responsible citizen, how to interact with other people in a more authentic way. And in some cases, you know, the schooling is getting in the way of the education of the sort of emotional education that needs to happen. And so that's actually a really funny quote in the area of, I mean, it's not funny, but it's an interesting quote in the area of mental health, because when you look at it from that standpoint, it's still true. The quote, it still holds true.
Yes, next one. What mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, more unashamed conversation.
So we have gotten so I think that there are a lot of benefits to social media. Social media is the place where some people feel, you know, and technology is how we connect. It's how you and I can have this conversation. It's how kids find belonging. There are a lot of great things about technology and social media, but I think that especially after the pandemic, when we have worked so much on computers, and we've been in front of technology all the time, even if it's just binging Netflix because we're so overwhelmed, we can't do anything else. We need to engage with each other. We need to go outside and just remember what it's like to be out there. I live in Wisconsin, and so for, you know, probably 8 months out of the year, it's cold and the weather's not very nice. And so it made the pandemic all that more challenging for those of us who had to be inside during the pandemic and couldn't actually go out and enjoy the sun or whatever. And so I think that quote, I would say, is, you know, just a really good, it's just a really good thing for, you know, what we should be doing right now, and you know, having these conversations and creating those authentic relationships and going outside and enjoying nature and just putting the technology away for a little while.
Absolutely. You mentioned that we need each other, and that was exactly my next quote. Would you like me to say it or move?
Yeah, absolutely.
Life doesn't make any sense without interdependence. We need each other, and the sooner we learn that, the better for us all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had an interesting experience recently where I was able to go out for the first time and travel again, to go work with a school district that I had worked with prior to the pandemic. And it was the first time that I had been in a professional learning opportunity again with teachers. And the first thing that happened was one of the teachers that I had been working with prior to the pandemic came in the room, and she said, "Oh my gosh, Mandy, I am so glad to see you." And she hugged me. And this was the first hug from my non-family that I had gotten in 18 months. And I'm not going to lie, I started to cry. I didn't realize how much I had missed the physical interaction like that with other people, or just the in-person interaction with other people, until that actually happened. Because I'm a little bit of an introvert. I don't necessarily seek out speaking with other people, but even being that way, I needed that connection more than I even understood. And it's going to be really important moving forward that we remember that connection is going to be a little overwhelming for some people at first. But we have to have that. We depend upon each other. Our brains are made to be social beings, no matter how introverted we think we are.
It's bad to be introvert.
It's what?
It's bad to be introvert.
Yeah.
Sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah.
So mental health problems don't define who you are. They are something you experience. You walk into the rain and you feel the rain. But importantly, you are not the rain.
My first book, The Fire Within, hits on that type of a quote just a little bit, in that mental health issues do not define who you are. They don't make you who you are.
Yes.
I may have depression. I am not a depressed person. I am not depression myself. I'm so much more than that. And if you believe that you really are your mental health issues, again, we talked about dark places. That can really be a dark place to be. And one of the most healing things that I think that you can do is understand who you are as an individual and what you bring to the table when you interact with other people. Because I guarantee that you're more than anxiety. You're more than depression. You have so many other talents that come along with those things. And understanding those and embracing those are a really powerful way to start to heal. And so I think that, like with Fire Within, with the first book, myself and several of the other contributors for the book, we talk about how, certain situations caused our mental health issues. But those mental health issues also gave us certain, post-traumatic growth areas, certain strategies that we used with students because we had experienced that. And many people who deal with depression and anxiety can say, I connect with my fellow educators who have those also better because I have experienced that and I can be empathetic. I connect with my students who have mental health issues better because I have experienced that and I can be empathetic. And so, we are way more than our mental health issues, for sure. And part of our healing is understanding that.
Yes. If we start being honest about our pain, our anger, and our shortcomings, instead of pretending they don't exist, then maybe we will leave the world a better place than we found it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that goes back a little bit to what you said about, how do we make people feel comfortable? And because people will not show that side of themselves until they feel comfortable enough to do it generally. And there, if we take all of those things, we take sadness that we have and anger that we have, and we continue to box those up and we shove them down deeper, one day those are going to come out as other things. Something you were mad about is going to come out as rage. Something you were sad about is going to come out as depression. It will come out as other things. And it's just really a matter of time if you keep boxing things down. Not only that, but the vulnerability that you show when you go through, I used to see a counselor who she used to say, feel to heal. And when you go through the process of feeling an emotion and stepping into that emotion and understanding that emotion and moving forward, you are actually showing other people around you how to do that too. And that it's okay to be vulnerable and to understand that none of us are perfect. Like, we're human. We were not made perfect. We weren't supposed to be. So we were never meant to be perfect. And so understanding that piece of it and sharing that with other people is going to allow them to also share and really have a trickle down effect on everybody. And when we can let go of those negative emotions, the thing that is going to fill it is joy and happiness and all of those things we want to be filled with. And so it's a really important piece of moving forward.
You know what's strange, or maybe I shall say what's eccentric about this is that some people want you to be positive all the time. Okay, when you sometimes feel depressed, or you're scared or frustrated or anxious, they start to deal with the situation differently. They want you to be positive all the time. They think you are a negative person when you do that, but you are just a human being. You are just reacting as a normal human being.
And I think that that's one of the reasons why it's so important to be able to articulate what's happening. Because if I go into a meeting or I go into a conversation with you and I say, I'm here for this conversation, but I'm going to give you a heads up that my anxiety has been terrible today. Like I had a panic attack this morning. I've been very on edge. So I want to have this conversation. You are going to go into that conversation with a different view than if I just went into it and started complaining about everything, right? Or you might even say, you know what, if you're having that kind of a day, let's reschedule this. We can do this tomorrow. It's no big deal at all. Like, let's give you the time to rest and to breathe, and we can do this tomorrow. So there's a lot of power in being able to name what you're feeling and then articulate it to other people, because it does give everybody sort of a different view of what's going on. And I think when people can't do that, when they can't articulate that they're feeling sad or angry or whatever it is, they are viewed as negative sometimes, because they don't express it. So they're not feeling it, they're not working through it, and therefore it perpetuates and only just keeps getting worse. And so there's a lot of really good things about being able to own your emotion and step into it and articulate it to somebody else.
Yes, and it's perfectly fine to do this. It's because after all, it's not their journey; it's your journey.
Right. Exactly. Yes. 1000%.
Yes, that was a really great and interesting discussion and conversation with you about this really great topic. So there is one about there is hope even when your brain tells you there is not. I think this quote is a lie. Because you can't get into a conflict with your brain. I know that sometimes some people follow their hearts, some people follow their brain, but most of the time we are reasonable, we are logical, we follow our brain.
Yeah, what I've found is that what would be more true for me is that there is hope even when you feel that there is not, because I think hope is an emotion, and it might come from thinking in your brain, but it is it's not something necessarily that your brain's going to be telling you that there's not. And so I think maybe what would make more sense to me is that there is hope even when you feel that there is not.
Yes, the reason I mentioned this quote because I had a webinar with the educator from England about this topic, about the brain and how it is affecting our body, and we discussed the placebo effect. For example, when you take a medication, it's fake. The medication is fake, and the doctor tells you to take this medication, and you feel okay, you feel good, but the medication is fake. Yeah. So here the brain tells you that the medication is good, and the placebo effect. So that's why I said that this quote is a lie.
Yeah, and part of the I think that the placebo effect is really interesting because I've had people say to me, kind of that idea where you might say to somebody, oh my gosh, I don't feel good. And they're like, oh, you know what? I don't feel good either. That, you put it in their head that they didn't feel good either. But my feeling is on that a little bit is that if somebody feels it, or if somebody thinks it, then it's true. It's at the bare minimum, it's their truth. And so it doesn't matter why necessarily something is happening like that. It is their truth at the moment. And so for example, also on the flip side, if I say something like, you know what, I'm having a really good day. I could be having a really terrible day in all actuality, but if I think I'm having a good day, who cares? Let me think it. and that will, that should perpetuate. So I think that sometimes whatever we think, like really whatever we think is okay. It's just how we deal with those thoughts and how we move on those that makes it, that kind of creates what we're moving forward into. So
Yes, it's how we act upon those thoughts, because basically we choose which thoughts to follow, which thought to neglect,
yeah.
and based on those decisions, we our lives, take or takes a certain shape.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I know that you want to have a comment about something you would like to share before we close
Yeah, I
this session.
can.
You want to talk about this?
Second here. Yeah. So one of the things that I had shared out, and I talk about this on my blog quite a bit. So if it's something that anyone wants to look up, you certainly can. Look it up on my blog as well. But I made this this diagram here, this graphic, just to make it a little bit easier to understand. And so again, one of the issues that I talk about regularly is educator disengagement. And what things can happen, like what different categories of things can happen that cause educators to unintentionally stop living their jobs. And now you can find pieces of the pandemic in every single one of these. You would be able to say, well, from the standpoint of the pandemic, this is what would have happened in personal adversity. And so the pandemic absolutely can cause and has caused educator disengagement. The important piece is understanding which ones of these you may have experienced in order to understand how you can better help yourself come back from those disengagements. And so, for example, some of the types of situations that may have happened would be personal adversity. And again, this is outside the pandemic as well. So personal adversity are situations that happen in an educator's life that really take attention away from a focus on the job. And so a lot of times I hear educational leaders say, well, you need to, teachers need to leave their stuff in their car. They need to leave their personal lives at home. And that's easy to say and much harder to do. And so if I'm going through a divorce, my emotional capacity is really taken up by trying to figure out what my personal life is. If I find that I have cancer and I'm trying to go through chemotherapy or go through any of the healing process with cancer and still try to teach, a lot of my emotional capacity through no fault of my own is going to be taken up by that other adversity. And so what people tend to do is they're putting all of their emotions into this other thing that's happened, and they just don't have the capacity left for their teaching as they did before. And whether you think this is right or wrong, whether you agree or disagree that people should bring their personal lives into their job, the fact is that we're human and it happens anyway. And so there's very little you can do if there's that big of a situation happening and you're trying to deal with it and work. And so personal adversity might be one reason that you might pull away from loving your job as much. There's professional adversity, which is sort of the same thing, but it's workplace situations. And so it might be, again, a climate cultural issue. It could be things like workplace bullying, racism, microaggressions, any kind of toxic climate and culture, being reprimanded for risk taking. All of those types of things can be considered a professional adversity, and might also take your emotional capacity as well. The third one that I've identified is teacher trauma. Teacher trauma are situations that are very specific to being a teacher that can be a traumatic event. So the examples would be in the United States. I'm not sure about Morocco, but we have something called active shooter drills for school shootings, and some of these have not been done in the most empathetic way to teachers. So for example, they've brought in police officers who have taken airsoft guns, and they have done active shooter drills where the police officers shoot at the teachers, and which is very upsetting, obviously, and definitely not best emotional practice. And so that can be something that really causes a trauma. A death of a student, which is no fault of anybody's, but still very traumatic. And then any kind of assault, battery, or harassment by students and parents could all be considered a teacher trauma. We also have secondary traumatic stress. And secondary traumatic stress, some people get the secondary piece a little bit mixed up. They think that it means that it's trauma that happens again. But what it actually is if you work with students or even adults who are going through a trauma, and you hear about this trauma consistently and you're very empathetic, you can develop the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder from working with those students or teachers. And so you don't actually get PTSD, but you can just develop some of the symptoms in that secondary traumatic stress. So it's not secondary as it's trauma happening again. It's secondary as you're getting it as like a secondary story and not necessarily experiencing it, but can still get some of those symptoms. And then we have the last two, which the next one you'll recognize is burnout. Burnout is actually, in the United States, it is a diagnosable medical condition. It's, has to do with prolonged stress and can cause a lot of exhaustion. A lot of times people deal with a significant amount of overwhelm when they're burnt out as well. It can lead to procrastination and detachment from the things that you love. If you really love to teach, burnout's going to probably cause you to detach from that. And then finally, the last one is demoralization. And demoralization goes back to what I had said previously in the session, where I talked a little bit about teachers getting into education with this moral obligation to make a difference in students' lives. And when that moral obligation is challenged, which means they don't feel like they're making a difference, it can cause demoralization. And the pandemic was a really good example of this. The pandemic caused a lot of burnout and a lot of demoralization, but people keep calling everything burnout. And it's not. There's some cases where it's actually a demoralization issue. And so again, pandemic learning could have been a trigger for that. Also, any kind of initiatives through the school district or school that challenge the teaching identity. Things like political decisions, lack of community support, all of those can cause demoralization. And so again, it's just really important to understand and to be able to reflect on why you may be feeling disengaged, so you can take some steps in order to heal in those areas.
This is really interesting. What you said through all this reminded me of something extremely important. Is that sometimes what matters most is not what happens to us, but how we react. Because the problem is often the reaction. It's not the problem itself. You mentioned divorce. You mentioned a lot of problems. But the reaction, you said this earlier, we should regulate the emotions, we should regulate how we react to the problem.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so many of the behaviors that we see from people are nothing but reactions to
Absolutely.
prior adversity and trauma. And, you know, and one of the things that I've just come to realize as I get older is that so many times when people, this is just like human knowledge I've gained. This isn't anything I've read about, but so many times people's reactions to me are more about them than it is about me. It's more about situations and experiences and triggers that they have that just happen to be aimed at me. And it, like, honestly, my dealings with people have become so much easier since then, when I'm not always so worried about what people are saying to me as what the root of that, where that's coming from. And with our students as well, so many of their behaviors are based on their experiences and trauma. It's not meant to be personal. And we have a really hard time, you know, teachers have a hard time not taking student behaviors personal because our jobs, we're so personally invested. But so often our students' behaviors are a result of their trauma and their experiences, not anything that isn't even necessarily happening in front of them at the moment. And again, that just makes sort of human interaction so much easier when we understand that.
Yes, that's great. So, but it's always good to adopt this approach, zero reactions to
Yeah.
because in this way you will feel peaceful, you will feel good about yourself. If you keep reacting to every situation, come on, you will end up in the hospital or something.
Yeah, exhausted for sure. It takes a
Yes.
lot of energy to continually react. So
So Mandy, thank you so much for this great session.
yeah,
We really,
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me again. I appreciate it.
we really appreciate all those ideas, your you know, the discussion, the conversation. I think having conversation is sometimes like reading a book or something, because when you talk with people, you discover something about yourself and about them. So it's the interactions really help us develop.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So, so thank you so much. Do you have any quick final comments or reactions?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I mean, I really hope. I hope that one thing that educators remember is how amazing what they have done actually is. And if you take time over, you know, if you have any kind of school break, that you have time to process and to really reflect on what has happened over the last year, be sure to also take time to celebrate the things that you've done, that there are not many other professions on the whole planet who accomplished that same thing.
Absolutely.
And so please take the time to celebrate that and understand the amazingness that you actually did for the last 18 months, while you take time to also heal.
So this is a great message for all teachers. You are amazing.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Mandy. We hope to meet you soon in developing a course.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So thank you and have a great day
All right, thank you. Bye,
or
everyone.
night. Bye.